Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the A Queens Roundtable Show. This is part of the Born to Lead docu-series, and I am your host, Dr. Jacqueline Kabah Harrison. So excited that you are joining us for this awesome episode. And I also want to thank you all that have been following me since the beginning of the A Queens Roundtable Show. Just want you to know that your support is appreciated. This particular, the Eight Queens Roundtable show, as well as the Queen Spotlight and the Born to Lead docu-series, are all being streamed on the Realizing Your Potential television network app, and it is available on platforms such as Amazon Fire, Apple TV, Roku, as well as we're on the mobile. If you just want to check us out on your mobile app, that's cool too. We are in the iOS store as well as the Android store, and of course on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Oh, and on YouTube. So you have no excuse. So make sure you check out this episode and all of the other episodes of the other awesome interviews from the Born to Lead docu-series. So my next guest, her name is Gabs. And I'm going to just tell you just a little bit about her. And then I'm going to bring her into the studio and let her continue to elaborate on who she is and how she serves in her business. After losing her son 7 years ago, Gabs Hayes prioritizes fundamentally shifted time over money, doing over dreaming, memories over material things. Today, this entrepreneurial mom is building the village parents in business desperately need. As a workshop leader and a mentor to early stage entrepreneurs, Gabs helps parents build focused businesses with boundaries that honor family and mental health. Oh, I love that. She's the fiercest cheerleader for those chasing a life they love, proving you can succeed without the burnout. I'm going to go ahead and bring her into the studio. Well, hello there, Gabs. How are you?
I'm doing well. Dr. Jacqueline, how are you today?
I am doing great. So let me first start by saying, very sorry for your loss, losing your son. Um, I can't even imagine, um, what you and your family would be going through. But my condolences to you. So thank you again for being on the show. So listen, you got the floor. I'm passing the mic to you. Tell us a little bit more. I mean, I know I just read just a little snippet about who you are and what you do, but go ahead and elaborate a little bit more and let us know a little bit more about the ins and outs of what you do in your business.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Gabs Hayes, and I'm an entrepreneurial mom of three. I've got all the ages and stages at this moment. So I've got a 5-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 13-year-old, soon to be 14. And I'm married to my favorite person in the entire world. And so I'm so grateful to have a life partner that I'm doing life with. And I have a background in corporate project management and then software and product development. And so, I found myself at a very early stages of my career hustling, grinding, trying to move as fast as possible, bringing all of these projects to life. But I was always doing it for other people and never for projects that were deep inside of me. And I honestly used to think I was not a creative person. I thought I was very type A. I thought I was very analytical. And that was just because that's what my career needed from me. So I was able to kind of morph and shift myself into that. But as I started to break down some of those walls, and, as you mentioned, I lost my son 7 years ago. His birthday is actually this weekend. So we're getting ready to gear up for a big celebration for him. And it was this really poignant moment in my life where I realized tomorrow is truly not promised to any of us. And whether you choose to show up for it or not, life's going to keep going by. Those years keep passing, the days keep passing. And so that's when I started to kind of peel back the layers of who I thought I had to be and who I thought I was to figure out who I really am. And I found my way into entrepreneurship through that. And then once I landed there, it was that aha moment where I was like, this is what I was supposed to be doing my entire life. And I just didn't know how or why. And so I spent the first 4 years of my entrepreneurial journey doing it the hard way, doing it alone, trying to prove something to everyone, trying to prove it to myself, and really made it more of an uphill battle than it needed to be. And so now I feel really grateful that I'm in this space where I'm just taking the hard stuff of entrepreneurship, the scary stuff of entrepreneurship, and making it feel easy, making it feel relatable, and really just helping those who are building businesses stay focused on what actually moves the needle versus getting distracted by all the shiny objects that are all over the place.
Oh my God. Just thinking about social media today, I mean, we are constantly being pulled in so many different directions, right? It's so easy to get distracted.
Well, and to compare yourself, right? I think, one of the biggest downfalls I had was when I started my entrepreneurial journey, I was really looking to mentors and coaches who weren't parents. And so the game I was playing was a very different game than what they were playing. They say we all have the same 24 hours in a day. We don't. If you are raising kids, you don't have the same 24 hours in a day. And so that definitely led to some burnout for me because I was trying to build as fast as my counterparts and I was trying to do very similar growth mechanisms that they were. And what I came to find out was like, it just didn't work for me. And I needed to take a step back to figure out not comparing myself to what they had, but seeing what they had or what they were able to accomplish as it's possible and using it as a guide to figure out how I was going to get there in ways that worked for my life.
Right. And you know what? Even when you are comparing, and believe me, I'm not an advocate of comparison, but I just wanted to make the point that, like you said, comparing yourself or trying to do or cover the same amount of ground as an individual that doesn't have children, even when you're looking at another person that has children as well, everyone has their own individual journey. You know what I mean? So that whole getting, and I know I've been there, and I know a lot of the other women that I've interviewed have been there too at some point or another, just this whole comparison game, but so that basically what you're sharing with us is that you help women to prevent, to, I guess, kind of go at their own pace, figure out what works for them. So to avoid burnout, is that the main focus of your business, is to help them avoid burnout and to do what they feel, I guess, kind of in their, what do they call it, zone of genius?
Yeah, certainly. So I actually work with moms and dads both. So I work with either or. Sometimes we have entrepreneurial couples that I work with also. So they're doing it together. But, I think for me, what I found was after coaching hundreds of entrepreneurs, so many of us decide either we had a problem that was never solved for us. So we want to go solve it for someone else. Or we see this like gap in the market and we decide we want to fix it. And so we start building this business with intention to begin with, usually with like, I kind of know where I want to go. I kind of know what I want to happen. But what is really a missing piece here is looking at your life and saying, what do I actually want my life to look like with this business? And, I think that's one of the most powerful steps you can take is taking a step back and saying, okay, I can chase this career. I can chase building this business. I can chase this hobby, whatever it may be. But what am I actually going towards? Because so many times I made decisions in my business that were going to actually drive me in a direction I didn't personally want to go in, but it's what I saw happening around me. It's what I saw other people doing. So I thought like, oh, that's what you have to do in order to move forward in your business. And so a lot of times when I start working with entrepreneurs, what we're doing is taking a pause for just a second and figuring out, what do you actually want your life to look like? For example, if you're deciding to become an entrepreneur because you want to be able to take your kid to soccer practice every Saturday, but instead you're building a business that has one-on-one coaching and you meet with people on Saturdays, those are in direct competition for what you actually want. But if you see someone else building a one-on-one business that meets on weekends, you might think that's normal. That's what you should be doing to hit that level of success. So it's giving that permission to kind of take a pause, take a step back, get real clear with where you want to go. And then step by step, let's figure out what it's going to take to get you there. Because when you look at that big list as a whole, that's real overwhelming to be like, okay, if I'm here in my business and I want to be here, but if we break it down, what's that saying, right? You can eat an elephant one bite at a time. So if we break it down a little bit, then you can start to figure out, okay, this is actually how I'm going to get from point A to point B. And then it makes it much more manageable to actually show up and do.
And actually keeping um being aware of being clear about what you want your life to look like. So I guess both of those, like you said, what do you really want to do in your business, and what do you want your life to look like, I guess, and how that intersects, I guess.
Yeah, certainly. And I think, one of the greatest gifts that entrepreneurship gave me, and I see it with most of my clients, is actually the ability to have this real awareness with yourself. And it's kind of because your business is so intertwined with who you are as a person, no matter how much you try to separate them. And so if you are not showing up in the world the way you want to, your business is going to reflect that. And so it's a really powerful win that people don't often count as a win, but it's the thing that kind of checks you and makes you realize, are you actually showing up the way you want to?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, and as you're talking, I'm just kind of sitting here thinking, and what's going through my head is that there's been so many times throughout this process, and I'm sure there'll be many more, where I've actually just kind of had to just stop and just take a pause, and just continue. And I feel like I'm going to sneeze, everybody, so I know it's going to come sooner or later. Okay, so yeah, so actually kind of that step back. And I feel like personally I'm constantly evaluating and reevaluating. And I say that because we've touched on the whole piece about social media, and when you're looking at some of these different coaches, let's just say coaches, consultants, whatever your lane is, you follow individuals that are also doing that, and it's easy to look and say, okay, so they're doing individual coaching, okay, and they're six figures, so that's what I need to do. Because I know for me initially that's what I felt that I wanted to do, but then as time went on, I was like, you know what, I really don't want to do individual coaching. It's like, I really don't want to do that, so just that whole piece of actually reevaluating and reassessing. And sometimes you start out doing something, and then as time goes on, you decide that maybe that's not what you want to do, or you want to do it in a different way. Like, I know for me, it's always been about empowering women, right? Particularly African American women. But and I wanted to initially do that through coaching, right? And then it went to group coaching. Now it's totally different, right? So now it's actually giving women a voice, just women entrepreneurs a voice to actually talk a little bit about themselves, how they got from point A to point B, and everything under the umbrella of personal, professional, and leadership development, right? So that is it. It's still helping individuals, right, become a better version of themselves. I'm just going about it a little bit differently than I was back in like 2016 when I first started. So I totally get that. I totally love that about that taking a pause. Because sometimes I think we think we have to always be in action. We always have to be going, 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 right? But if you're not really sure on the direction, then it could just be kind of like just busy work, or either just counterproductive, I would think.
Yeah. And, listen, there's some scientific evidence of like our brains giving us, hits of dopamine and excitement when we cross something off the to-do list. And our brain does not know the difference between crossing off something that actually is going to move the needle versus crossing off, I put my shoes on today. Like, it's the same dopamine hit no matter what thing you cross off. And so, I think it's to nobody's fault that you might be just building and doing and moving and taking action, but maybe you're not even taking action towards the right direction. And the reality is when you're so close to it, it's hard to even see the forest through the trees and know that you might be moving in a direction that's not the direction you want to go. But I love that you yourself have made just like a couple pivots to figure it out. And what I see is, and I'm guilty of it myself, most of us will make pivots along the way. I think I tell people all the time, if you want to step into entrepreneurship, just go ahead and know failure and pivots are a part of the journey. Just go on, put those in your suitcase and take them with you because they're ready to come. But when you take a step back, 99% of us, no matter what pivot we've made, our mission stays the same. And so that's also that, very powerful piece of taking a pause is, am I doing things? Am I taking action that actually even supports my mission? Because like you're saying, you can see someone else making 6-7 figures a year, and maybe they're doing stuff that's not super ethical, or maybe they're doing stuff that's not in alignment with your values, but you may bend them a bit because you're just trying to make it work. And so I would encourage you, if you feel like right now everything is an uphill battle, or it feels hard, or you're out there seeking for the answer that's going to make it work, the answer is inside of you, but it means you need to sit down for a second and spend some time with it.
Absolutely. I love that. So, you know what? And I know we're going to kind of cover or have two different angles during this interview. So, with having said that, or with that being said, what advice would you give, or is that the advice that you would give to someone just starting out in terms of like pivoting and expecting the failure or for things not to work out quite the way you wanted it to? Is that if I said what advice would you give, would that be it?
Yeah, I think and to add to that or to solidify it, you and I even talked about this briefly before we started recording. I would say that everything you do is an experiment. And when you start looking at it that way, of everything I do is an experiment and it's either going to work or it's going to teach me something and help me do something different the next time around, it literally doesn't matter what you do, there's a win in it. We get so caught up in saying success equals money, or success equals more clients, or success equals more visibility. But there's so much more success to be had, but you have to be willing to honor it and celebrate it. And so much of that is being able to, like you said, know that you may have to pivot, know that you may have to pause, know that you may have to change direction, but that you're staying true to yourself in that process.
Right. Absolutely. And the whole piece about failure, it's like when I talk to people that, friends, family, associates that aren't entrepreneurs, it's like that whole word of failure is they have a totally different view of it. It's like, oh my God, well, what if that doesn't work? And well, what are you gonna do? You know what I mean? Whereas, like you said, a seasoned entrepreneur, we're like, yeah, it didn't work. Wasn't a big deal. I just, because they're like, oh my God, are you okay? And it's like, yeah. You know how many programs I put together and like nobody showed up?
Yeah. I mean, I tell people all the time, I'm like, think about Walmart, think about Coca-Cola, think about all these big companies that they
Mm-hmm.
are literally launching stuff and ripping it off the shelves every day. And the things that they're taking off the shelf are things they spent millions and billions of dollars to build,
Yeah.
and they are taking it off the shelf without blinking an eye, and the world goes on and nobody thinks twice about it. But when you yourself have built something and no one shows up, or you decide to take it down or take it off your offerings, suddenly we take on that failure as like our own personal failure and our own ownership. But that's when you got to step back in and be like, wait a second, I'm a CEO, I'm making strategic decisions for my business, we tested something, it didn't work, move on to the next thing. What did we learn from that? What are we taking into the next season?
Yeah. Just like when you go into, I don't know, Starbucks, you could tell I'm hungry, everybody, because I'm going to give a food analogy. Like you go into Starbucks or maybe Dunkin' Donuts, and you're like, oh yeah, I want blah blah blah, and you give them a specialty item, and like, oh, we don't sell that anymore. Oh, it didn't do well. You're like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
But you're right. It's like they put it out there, they tried it, didn't get the results that they wanted it to. Boom, they don't even sell it anymore. That's it. It's a thing of the past. They're on to the next. So when you said that,
Yeah.
let me think of it. Yeah.
And I think, like you're saying too, so often we also think of a failure means no one showed up or we never made any money. There's a lot of power in deciding something is making money, but it's not a good fit, or it's not going to scale right, or it's not going to provide the customer experience that's really important to me. And so while it may be a source of revenue for you, there's also a lot of power in sitting back and saying, but is this supporting my long-term goals? Because like you're saying, there's probably nothing Starbucks has launched that never made them money, that never brought in bottom line to their, revenue. But there's thresholds. And if it doesn't meet that threshold, if they can't scale it to multiple stores, if it doesn't make enough revenue, then they decide to take a lesson from that and move. And so when we start thinking about, we are not people building a business. We are CEOs who are making strategic decisions for this thing that we're bringing into the world. It gives you a lot more power and a lot more freedom to say, that was part of the journey. That was fun. And now it's time for the next roller coaster ride.
That's right. That's right. Because I am I'm this so this is the last thing I'm gonna say, and we're gonna move into the leadership piece. So I kind of got caught up. I did a thing, right? Kind of got a little caught up because I saw that a lot of my fellow coaches and consultants were doing books. They were doing anthologies. I was like, oh, okay, let me do an anthology. So did an anthology, it was a good experience, but I know that that's just not for me. Like I see people, some people, that's just their thing. They love it. I did one, I'm good. That's not something that it just didn't float my boat. Like you know what I mean? It was great. It was quote unquote successful, but I knew that that wasn't something that I was going to continue. You know what I mean? So, and like you said, if you can't scale it or it doesn't feel right, then it's best just to kind of, just to let that alone and learn from it,
Yep. Owning your journey.
owning your journey. So, Gabs, leadership. When you think of leadership, what comes to your mind in terms of, just give us a couple of things that you feel a good leader embodies?
Yeah. So the very first thing I think of is meet your people where they are. And I think in order to do that, you need to set the stage for a certain tone of vulnerability and a certain tone of a safe space amongst you and the person that you're leading, for them to be safe, you feel safe to let you know what's really going on in their world. But the sooner you build that trust with them, the sooner you can actually support them in the ways that they need to be supported. And 9 times out of 10, if someone feels supported, they're going to be your best employee or your best team member, because we all want that. We all want to feel safe. We all want to feel stable. And so if they know they have that within their team and within their leaders, that's the first thing that I think of. The other thing that I think of is along these same lines of failure is like giving your team some space to try. A lot of us are designed to test out new things and think bigger than status quo. But a lot of times we get into roles where it's like, here's the SOPs, here's the process, here's the policy. So like you just stick to this thing and don't exit outside of these bounds. And I think we're leaving a lot of creative genius on the table when we do that, because there is a lot of power in having fresh eyes and different eyes looking at situations and bringing up solutions. And so, I think also giving them that space to say, I trust you and I encourage you to think bigger, think differently, and let's figure out how we bring some of those thoughts that you have to life. And again, some of them are not going to be great, but what the team will learn in the process of trying to bring it to life is invaluable. You can't put an ROI or a dollar amount on that.
So, giving them the space to maybe to fail, or maybe not to fail, but to not completely meet the mark.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, look, there's certain jobs, like if you're in a manufacturing job and the car bolt has to be tightened 7.5 times so the door doesn't
Mhm.
come flying off, like that's a different story, right? Like let's make sure that we're doing things safely. But I can think when I worked in large corporations, I mean, I've worked for Apple, I've worked for Fortune 10 companies. So, ones that have pretty strict guidelines and pretty strict rules. And some of that is a byproduct of the size of the company. When you are moving an army in a certain direction, everyone's got to be marching in the same way. And so there is some, truth to that. But I also think we are putting people in boxes, and people are, beginning to believe that they aren't creative, that they don't think out of status quo, that they don't have solutions. They're not problem solvers. And what starts to happen is we have these incredible individual contributors who are doing great work in the box that they've been put in. And then when it's time for them to grow or time for them to scale into their career, and the next step is like middle level management, they don't have any leadership skills or problem solving skills because they've been forced to stay in this box this whole time. And so we're not only are we diminishing people and who they really are and what their extremely great capabilities are, we are not preparing for scalability inside of these businesses either, because we're telling people basically, sit down, be quiet. This is how it goes. Do it like this. And then when suddenly we need to fill a leadership position, we're scrambling because we're like, we don't have anyone who can actually run a team because we've never allowed them to step up and run a team. And leadership doesn't have to be a title. It has to be the culture and who you are as a person. And are you the person rallying the team and encouraging them? And so, if leadership is something you are intrigued by or interested in, don't wait for a title to start learning and exploring those, experiences. Just start doing it and see what you can do, whether it's inside of your paid job or if you need to go volunteer somewhere. But there's ways to also, spread your wings some and try and get some of those leadership skills that way also.
Okay. Wow. That's a lot, Gabs. I wanted to touch on a couple of points, but you were hitting them, boy. So the very latest thing that you touched on was actually not preparing companies, putting people in boxes and not allowing, or basically not preparing them for leadership roles, whether it be in that company or any place else, because they're kind of putting them into a box and not allowing them to, I guess, fully like express themselves and basically show up as the best version of themselves, I guess, right? Because how so okay, so having said that, I think I can identify with that. So how does a company do that? How do they prepare their, and it wouldn't just be just now, so but would it be everyone or would it be certain individuals that they would prepare? I guess that's one. And then two, for those that they do prepare, how would they best do that?
Yeah. So the first thing that comes to mind is not everyone is set out to be a leader, and that's okay. I think that's one of the biggest challenges with current company structures is how do you progress in your career? Climb the ladder and you go from individual contributor to manager to director to VP, right? And so we're told right now that's the only way you grow by influence in the company is by stepping into a leadership position. But not everyone's great at that, nor does everyone want to be that. Like I think about my husband. My husband's great at he can rally a team, he can get everyone moving in a single direction, but tell him he's got to start doing schedules and payroll and, audits and all. He's like, no, I don't want to do all that. And so, I see it even with him. He gets stifled because it's like, well, if you don't want to step into a certain leadership level, this is all we have for you. And I think there's a massive miss there because people who are individual contributors who actually genuinely love their work, they are going to be the biggest influencers for how the other people coming into the team show up and do the work and the quality of work that is delivered. So you think about someone who loves it but doesn't want to lead a team, they are still going to be your biggest lever for quality. And that's something that you cannot miss, but we see a lot of companies missing. The other thing I think about when you talk about how do we actually start preparing people for leadership and then make that transition, I'll give you an example of what not to do so we can kind of enter into that conversation. But in one of my corporate careers, I had worked there like 8 years and I did all the things they told me to do. Get a degree. Okay, I got that. Go to this leadership program. Okay, I got that. Move to this team. Okay, I did that. I followed all the steps they told me to. And then when I was up for my next promotion, they said to me, but you don't have direct leadership and, skills. You only have leadership by influence. And so they literally told me, go leave, go work for our competitor, go get a manager title, and then come back. Because once you've had a manager title, now we can, move you up the ladder again. And I'm thinking to myself, I spent 8 years of my life here. You've paid for me to go to school. You've paid to put me through your leadership program. You've paid for me to go to all these trainings and fly to different, teams in different states. But now I have to leave to come back. And so again, I think that's part of this oh, well, this is just policy and procedure. And we're not thinking about the people, their lives, their feelings, what they need to be successful in those roles. And let me tell you, I left and I never went back. And I think that's a big miss for that company. And that happens with so many people that I hear from. And so let's be logical here. Even in leadership, this is a people to people relationship. You are a person to a person making decisions. You are a person to a person taking care of each other. And that taking care of each other, I think, is a huge piece that we've missed, because it's just become so transactional to like get the next promotion or get the next job title, instead of this like true career growth of a human being and where they want to go in their career as well.
You know, Gabs, I'm thinking, first of all, that's insane. The fact that they told you you had to go someplace else, leave the company, get some supervisory experience, and then come back. And you're like, okay, I know you're like, oh, all right, you know what? Stay there and hold your breath. I'll be right back. That sounds insane. But okay, I just had to throw that out there. But so it's like that's a very good point that you brought up about when people think about elevating or growing in a company, they tend to think about moving up the ladder in the company into middle management, director, those types of roles, right? So individuals can, they can get their motivation, I guess, thinking about the different levels of moving up. But the individual that you talked about earlier that isn't interested in management, right? Like how do they grow? How do we ensure that they grow? Because I mean, let's just say even in your own company, or if you're helping another entrepreneur and they're building their company, let's just say, you are going to have those individuals that do, like I said, want to move into leadership roles, but you're going to have those individuals that's just not their jam. So it's just like, how do you, and I'm thinking of this as we going along. I told you this is going to happen, but how do we cater as a leader? How do we cater to both of those individuals, and to, because everybody wants to learn and grow,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because if we stop growing, then we're done, right? So how do we cater to both of those individuals?
Yeah, so I think this opens up a really big conversation, all around value. So, and I don't mean like core values that you believe in, but value and spending money in exchange for value.
Mm,
When I look at my company and the people that come into it, I do have certain people that need to be leaders because that's what that role, needs.
right.
But then I have certain roles that don't. I just need you to be amazing and incredible and love the work that you're delivering and deliver it at high quality. And so for me, I look at the way we compensate people and it also give them opportunities to learn and grow by what is valuable to them.
Okay.
Right. So, like, if I know someone and I'm thinking of one of my clients now, we have an incredible software developer, been there forever. He can run that entire company if we needed him to, but he doesn't want to do that. But have an emergency, he's the first person to get on the phone and solve it and get you out of, the chaos that you're in. What's important to him? When he takes his vacations, he does not want to be contacted, not once. Please don't tell me. I want to completely disconnect. I don't want to know what's going on here. But when he's here and he's in it. And so it's knowing those things. And I think it also goes back to that meet your people where you are. There are certain people like me. I really never disconnect. That's a personal choice, not because I can't. I've built a business that I can, but I also love it. I love every second of it. And so I want to know what's going on. I want to be included, but also don't expect that I'm available 24/7, 365. And so I think it's knowing like what motivates someone. It's not always money. Actually, most scientific studies prove money is the least motivator out there when it comes to benefits and salaries and compensation packages. But what do companies lever with? Well, we got this money and this is what your salary band is, right? And so it's just realizing, again, I think it's very small tweaks, but tapping into the human aspect of this, that each person needs different things. Maybe somebody on your team doesn't care about being a leader, but they will write all of the policies and procedures. They will do all of the organization of the team. They will make sure everything's moving in the same direction, with the one caveat that they want to drive their kids to school every day. So from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m., they're offline. That's a simple ask of someone if they're going to be a really powerful team player every other day and every other hour of the day. And so it's just talking to them, finding out what do they need, what's important to them, and how do we make space in our companies to support that and make it happen.
Yep, yep. I mean, like you said, if all that person needs is just even like to take their kids to school or maybe to run home and check on their mom, that doesn't get around as good, whatever, that is a small ask, compared to, their value and what they bring to the table. But then that goes back to knowing your people. And that comes up every time I interview, someone, it always comes up being actually as a leader, knowing your team, right? No, actually understanding, because when you know a person, what you're really looking at is what drives that individual or what's important to them. You know what I mean? And I think oftentimes when I think about my own experiences, with supervisors and program directors, I think one of the main things is that most people in management that I've experienced kind of dangle that carrot about, money. You know what I mean? But that may not like that doesn't drive me. I mean, don't get me wrong. I wouldn't be there if they weren't giving me a paycheck. Make no mistake about not my own business, but that doesn't drive me. That doesn't drive everybody. Some people are driven by maybe being able, like how you mentioned earlier, to be able to add their own little creative spin on things. But that really boils down to knowing your people and actually getting input, and that trickles into authentic leadership. You know what I mean? Like actually, because in order to get to know someone, you have to do what? You have to be vulnerable. You know what I mean? And you have to actually um there's a skill in connecting in that way. You know what I mean? You have to make a person feel comfortable enough to be able to share with you who they really are, or what's important to them. And I think it was something that you mentioned earlier that I also think kind of plays into that. um I think a lot of times with companies, like if you don't meet the mark, it's either you pass or fail. You know what I mean? And oftentimes people feel like if they don't meet that, whatever that expectation is, that bottom line, and there's no gray area, then oftentimes people disconnect. But I think that recipe of allowing, actually acknowledging the progress that people have made, even though maybe you didn't meet the complete benchmark, so to speak, right? But you did try, you've grown, you've learned along the way, giving people that space, and also being transparent and leading authentically, to also allow that connection, because people have to feel that trust from their leader in order to really even let that individual know what's really important to them, which is what you really want to get to. Because when you understand the individual and you know what's important to them, and basically what motivates them to even coming in every day, you know what I mean? Once you get and able to tap into that, then that's what you need in order to work together as a team, everyone, driving towards a common goal.
Yeah. And I think, this really starts with company culture.
Mm.
Are we even enabling the leaders we have? Are we enabling them to be authentic? Are we enabling them the space and safety to figure out who they are? Because we can't expect our leaders to show up for our people in this vulnerable, safe way if they aren't doing that themselves. That's just not something that can be faked. You can spot it from a mile away. We've all had those leaders that, oh, you could tell me anything. And then you walk out of the office and you're like, I'm not telling you a dang thing, because like I don't trust you as far as I can throw you. And so like we all know what that feels like. And so, I just in general, like I encourage companies to take a step back and think about not only for our individual contributors, not only for the people on the teams, but have we even built that into our leadership team? Have we built that into our core company values? And, one thing I'll give here, because I think most people leave because of management. That's why they choose to leave and go to a different job. Remember, when you're interviewing, it's not just them interviewing you, you're also interviewing them. So if you know that you need this level of safety to be yourself, I mean, there are some people who can just like, I'm here, I'm getting a paycheck and I'm getting out of here and I don't care about it. That's great. But if you know you're someone who is going to go above and beyond, you want that safety, you want that connection with your leadership team, those are the questions to be asking inside of your interview. So that way you can make sure you're stepping into a space that's authentic for you too.
Yep, absolutely. You're interviewing them too. So when they ask you those questions about, well, tell me a time where, I don't know, you handled conflict, something along those lines. You know those typical interview questions. And then I can say to them, or whoever, whoever else we're speaking to out there can say something along the lines of, well, how do you handle it when an employee doesn't, doesn't meet the quotas? You know what I mean? It's just kind of, you're asking them like, well, what, like, do you sit down and actually talk with them and say, hey, well, why do you think you were having difficulty? What do you need? How can we be more supportive? How can we work together to help you meet this, whatever this goal or this quota is, right? You know what I mean? So it's like you're absolutely right. And speaking of that, the whole game changed for me when I started interviewing companies too. Like when they're interviewing me, I'm interviewing them too. So at the end, okay, well, they always say, well, do you have any questions? And I think that they expect you to say, oh no. And I'm like, yes, I do. I have.
Let me get my list.
Right. One second, you know what I mean? But right, so you're asking them, and that, like you said, you're really trying to get a sense of what their culture is like, But I think just being able to be human, being human, like working as a therapist, I have to feel comfortable saying some days that, you know what, this was really heavy for me today, and not have that be held against me,
Mm-hmm.
or somehow I'm deficient, or, oh, you can't do the job. No, it's not that. I'm human, just
Yep.
like everybody. We have off days sometimes, but just I know that I thrive better when I can be my authentic self, and when I feel that I can trust that individual, even if in times of uncertainty. Because a lot of times with a lot of these companies now, there's a lot of uncertainty out there about, people being laid off, people losing jobs and things of that nature, people being replaced, right? There's all sorts of anxieties that people are dealing with. And to have a leader that is able to say, you know what, I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure. But what I am sure of is that I'm here with you, and we're in this together. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Just something as simple as that. You don't always have to know all the answers. Even if you want to present that you know all the answers, you don't. You
Yeah.
know what I
None of
mean?
us do.
So but that, again, that kind of falls into place with that whole authenticity piece, and being transparent, and actually allowing people to, to feel comfortable enough to be themselves, in the work environment. And I mean within reason, of course, but yeah, being able to be yourself and be comfortable.
Yeah. No more checking our personal lives at the door. Our lives are our lives, and we're human, and we're going to show up that way.
Yeah. People do always say that, don't they? Leave, check it all at the door. But is that realistic? I don't think so.
No, I tried though. I could tell you I tried. That's what I was taught, but it caught up to me eventually.
Yeah. So we're coming towards the end of our interview. This has been really great, Gabs. I mean, you've given so much insight. I mean, I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to this one again.
Well, thank you
So
for having me. It's been such a fun conversation.
yeah, absolutely. Last, two last things. One, what do you want to leave the audience with as far as leadership? And then two, let them know where they can find you, how they can connect with you. And I don't know if there's something on the horizon, maybe, I don't know, a program that you're putting together that's going to be launching soon, or a podcast or an article, just let them know a little bit more about what you have that's coming up, I guess.
Yeah. So I think from a leadership perspective, what I would leave you with is it's okay that you don't vibe or jive with every type of leadership style out there, but you'll go a lot further if you spend some time figuring out what you need to be your most successful self and then finding leadership that aligns with that or choosing to build it yourself. That's also a big option there. But just knowing that like you also have a right to say, I don't match with this type of leader or I need this type of support, and then putting yourself in the rooms that allow you to have that. Life is just too short to be showing up in ways that we don't want to be showing up and to be spending our days with people we don't want to be spending it with. So go after that and spend some time with yourself and figure out what that is. And if I can help you in any way through that conversation, through journal prompts, through needing someone to bounce ideas off of, I'm on LinkedIn. That's the platform I hang out on the most. So you can find me there, Gabs Hayes. But I also do have a podcast myself called Overwhelmed and Over It. So if you want to take a listen there, I release new episodes usually twice a week. So I'm there hanging out as well.
Cool. Give me the name of the podcast again.
Overwhelmed and Over It.
Okay, overwhelmed and over it. I like that. That's not even in your bio, Gabs.
I know. It's like, how do you put all the things? I don't want the 12-page long bio. So try to keep it short.
All right, how long have you been doing the podcast?
It'll be a year in May. So it's coming up pretty
Next
quick.
month be your
Yeah.
annual. Okay. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Are you on YouTube as well? YouTube channel?
Uh, yeah, my podcast streams to YouTube, but I don't, specifically create content for YouTube. That's not in my wheelhouse just yet, but one day.
Okay. All right. Well, awesome. Well, thank you again for being a part of the Born to Lead docuseries. This has been very informative. I'm pretty sure that the audience has also gotten a lot of cool tips from you. You know how to connect with her. Look her up on LinkedIn, connect with her. And, if you guys can collaborate or if you want her services, just reach out to her. And thanks again, Gabs, for being on the show. It's been a pleasure. And everyone, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Born to Lead docuseries. Again, make sure you check out all of the others. Tell a friend or two as well about the Born to Lead docuseries so they can come and check it out. And make sure if I can be found. Well, you can find me on LinkedIn under Dr. Jacqueline Kabah Harrison, as well as Facebook under Dr. Jacqueline Kabah Harrison. I'm mostly on LinkedIn though. So if you're interested in being interviewed or you want to host your own show or podcast on the Realizing Your Potential TV network, link up with me, reach out to me on LinkedIn, and let's basically set a time to chat and let's make it happen. All right, everyone. So take care. And until next time. All right. Bye bye now.